Kirk Cousins. Wow. How about Kirk Cousins being a free agent once again on the NFL market? Now it seems like Kirk Cousins will end up being a free agent for the first time since the 2018 offseason. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about Kirk Cousins entering NFL free agency, as it seems like he will not be returning to the Vikings. Although Kirk Cousins has been Mr. Reliable for the most part, there are a lot of opinions circulating Kirk Cousins' NFL career, as he has only won one playoff game in his NFL career. Even with the lack of team success for Kirk Cousins, he has always managed to get paid a lot of money all the time. Before I say anything else though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So here it is. What will happen to Kirk Cousins this offseason? And based on what I'm hearing from NFL insiders and based on what I truly believe in, I think Kirk Cousins will end up leaving the Minnesota Vikings. You guys have to remember that the Minnesota Vikings cannot franchise tag Kirk Cousins whatsoever. Thus, if Kirk Cousins is a free agent, the Vikings can do nothing to retain Kirk Cousins unless if they can get a long-term deal done. And obviously, it seems like Kirk Cousins doesn't want to get a long-term deal done with the Minnesota Vikings. And it also seems like the Vikings don't want to get a long-term deal done with Kirk Cousins, which I honestly cannot blame that organization, because you look at how the Minnesota Vikings right now are in a mess, at least financially speaking. They have to pay a lot of people and they don't necessarily have a lot of cap space to work with. They still have to retain Justin Jefferson into a long-term deal. I know he's got one more year left on his contract, but Justin Jefferson is obviously an elite wide receiver. He's probably a top 3 wide receiver. If you have to ask me where I would rank wide receivers in the game of football, and the Minnesota Vikings probably have to pay him a ton of money in order to keep him. The problem is, if you pay Justin Jefferson a lot of money, well, you're also going to have to pay Kirk Cousins a lot of money. But obviously, if you pay Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson a ton of money, that's going to leave less money for everybody else, because the NFL is a hard salary cap. This is not a soft salary cap league where you can manipulate the numbers and you can just say, okay, I'm just going to spend a lot of money and spend into a luxury tax. This is the NFL where you have a hard cap. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings don't have that kind of money to shell out to Kirk Cousins in terms of being able to keep him happy in Minnesota. From what I'm hearing with Kirk Cousins, he is demanding $45 million a year. And I don't think the Minnesota Vikings are in position to give Kirk Cousins that contract. Even if they were in position to give Kirk Cousins that contract, I still would not give that contract if I were the Minnesota Vikings. If I'm the Minnesota Vikings GM, I'm telling Kirk Cousins, hey man, it's been a solid run for you on the Minnesota Vikings. You've had a solid 6 years on that franchise, but it's time to let you walk in free agency, because we can't afford to pay average quarterbacks big time money. Kirk Cousins is asking for money where it signals him being an elite quarterback in the National Football League. The problem is Kirk Cousins is not an elite quarterback in the National Football League. Now, do I think Kirk Cousins can be underrated at times? Absolutely. I think Kirk Cousins is one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. I think when you ask most NFL fans what their opinion of Kirk Cousins is, I think they would say that Kirk Cousins is a average quarterback that can't get the job done in big moments. And although I don't disagree with that sentiment, I will say on the defense of Kirk Cousins that he did play pretty solid for the Washington Redskins years ago, where he got the Redskins to playing competitive football. They even won the division title in 2015, and he did take the Minnesota Vikings to the playoffs on 2 different occasions, so that has to count for something. And Kirk Cousins has been a pretty solid contributor for that organization. He's been able to get Justin Jefferson the football at a pretty efficient level. He's been able to get Adam Thielen to enjoy a career year with him back in the 2018 NFL season. He also got to work with Stephon Diggs, who's one of the better wide receivers in the game of football, and he has had talent to work with on the Minnesota Vikings. The problem is the Minnesota Vikings defense has never really been that great to begin with, and obviously defense wins championships when we're talking about the game of football, and the Minnesota Vikings have just never fielded a great defense for Kirk Cousins. I know some people are going to say, oh, what about Case Keenum? How come he got to an NFC championship game and Kirk Cousins can't get to one? That means Kirk Cousins must be massively overrated, but I'm not going to take that position, because I recognize that the Vikings defense was extremely good in 2017, and then they fell off a cliff afterwards. Kirk Cousins never got to experience that type of defense. Well, obviously, Kirk Cousins is a solid quarterback. When you look at the statistics sheet, when you look at the eye test, when you look at his intangibles, there's a reason why Kirk Cousins is pretty good at making fourth quarter comebacks. It's because he has a calm demeanor in himself, and he's able to rally the troops around him and complete key passes in 2-minute drills. There's a reason why Kirk Cousins had the record for most fourth quarter comebacks in the National Football League. It's because Kirk Cousins did a good job rallying his team around him. That's part of the reason why the Minnesota Vikings were able to win 13 14 games with Kirk Cousins at quarterback during the 2022 NFL season. If you look at the statistics sheet for Kirk Cousins, you would think, wow, he has done a really good job in terms of adding up stats and getting the most out of the Minnesota Vikings. I know that they haven't won a lot with Kirk Cousins at the quarterback position, but that's not because Kirk Cousins is a bad quarterback. It's because Kirk Cousins doesn't rise up to the biggest moments in the biggest games. A prime example of Kirk Cousins not rising up to the challenge would be the Giants game in the wild card round in the 2022 NFL playoffs. I remember Kirk Cousins checked the ball down on 4th down instead of throwing up a one-on-one ball to Justin Jefferson, but instead Kirk Cousins elects to go for the check down. They don't get the first down, and obviously the Minnesota Vikings, they get upset in the first round of the NFL playoffs, and that's really been the whole theme of Kirk Cousins' NFL career. He has been a solid quarterback where the stats say, wow, he's a really good quarterback, but if you look at the salary of Kirk Cousins, you're thinking, wow, that guy is massively overpaid. He's been getting paid like he's an elite quarterback, even though Kirk Cousins is clearly not an elite quarterback. I would say Kirk Cousins is a top 12 quarterback in the National Football League. I would put him in the Dak Prescott tier, where he's a decent regular season QB. You might even say he's a pretty good regular season QB, depending on some years, but ultimately Kirk Cousins is not a guy where you can win a championship with him at the quarterback position. And that's why the Minnesota Vikings should let Kirk Cousins walk, because if you can't win a championship with Kirk Cousins at the current price tag that he's asking for, you got to let him walk. I know it's tough to let a solid quarterback walk out the room, but the Minnesota Vikings cannot afford to pay Kirk Cousins that kind of money and pay Justin Jefferson that kind of money, because everybody knows that Justin Jefferson deserves $30 million a year because he is an absolute baller. He carries that organization offensively, and you look at how he's had great numbers statistically speaking at wide receiver. And Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, don't get me wrong, but I don't think Kirk Cousins is this great quarterback that can elevate any franchise at any given time. As far as where I see Kirk Cousins going, I'm going to say that Kirk Cousins should go with the Atlanta Falcons in terms of choosing his next team, because the Atlanta Falcons right now are a QB away from making the NFL playoffs. They've already got a solid rushing attack in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. They've already got a solid wide receiver in Drake London. They've already got a pretty good tight end in Kyle Pitts. Their offensive line is above average. Their defense has been pretty good as well. The only reason why the Atlanta Falcons didn't make the playoffs last year was because of quarterback play. Obviously, when Desmond Ridder is your quarterback, he's not going to be a good quarterback whatsoever, and obviously it showed on the football field last year. You look at the talent the Atlanta Falcons had last year, there was no reason for that team to win only 7 games with the schedule that they had and the fact that Desmond Ridder was constantly being a turnover machine. The Atlanta Falcons should have easily won their division with the talent that they had, but obviously they didn't, and now they need a quarterback. But I think they should go ahead and sign Kirk Cousins. I really think the Atlanta Falcons are in the market for any veteran QB or any good rookie QB coming out of this draft class, because I think the team is a quarterback away from making the playoffs. And I think in that sorry division, I think if you get a guy like Kirk Cousins, he can get you to win the NFC South. I think that is a team that can afford to overpay for Kirk Cousins. They've got the cap space to do so. They've got a lot of young offensive talent on rookie contracts, so that means they have the room to overpay for some people, and I think Kirk Cousins would be a good fit on the Atlanta Falcons. You also look at the offensive coordinator the Atlanta Falcons have. That guy has a connection with Sean McVay. He used to be on Sean McVay's coaching staff. Why does that matter? Because Kirk Cousins once had a working relationship with Sean McVay back on the Redskins, so obviously there's some connection there. I think the Atlanta Falcons would be best suited for Kirk Cousins. He would immediately be the best quarterback in that division with Raheem Morris, a head coach who's a solid defensive mind. Maybe the Atlanta Falcons can improve their 7-10 season and become a playoff team. I know some people are saying that Kirk Cousins, he could be going to the Raiders, he could be going to the Steelers, he could be going to the Patriots. Heck, I've even heard that he could make a return to the Commanders, but the Atlanta Falcons have the most incentive to sign Kirk Cousins onto their roster because of the fact that they're a QB away from the playoffs. You can't say that about most of those other teams on the list, or if you could say that, they just don't have the money to overpay for Kirk Cousins. But if the Atlanta Falcons get Kirk Cousins, they're going to be immediately favorites to win the NFC South division. I would instantly believe in the Atlanta Falcons if they did that. Do I think they can get playoff success with Kirk Cousins at quarterback? No, I don't believe that. But in terms of getting to the playoffs, I think Kirk Cousins could absolutely get you there. I think the Atlanta Falcons have to be strong candidates to sign Kirk Cousins. They actually have the cap space to go ahead and sign a quarterback like Kirk Cousins. It's not exactly like the Atlanta Falcons are struggling in cap space. They've got plenty of cap space to work with, so they can offer Kirk Cousins something like 3 years, $135 million. I don't think the Vikings can pay him that kind of money, but I do think the Atlanta Falcons can pay him that kind of money. In other words, what I'm saying is, with the contract demands Kirk Cousins is making, he's basically confirming he's going to leave the Minnesota Vikings unless the Minnesota Vikings break the bank and pay up for Kirk Cousins once again. So that's why Kirk Cousins will leave the Vikings, as he will end up signing with the Falcons in order to elevate them back into the NFL playoffs for the first time since the 2017 NFL season. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @Dustin Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin Tran and that sports guy talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.